You know, Americans are very quick to criticize other countries for their restrictions on their media. The truth is, due to constant, relentless pressure from supporters of Israel, our own media is profoundly restricted. We can criticize every country, including our own, except for Israel. Our speakers will discuss Israel's influence on television, print media, and in the film industry. So I have the great honor to introduce Rula Jebreal, who is here to present the second keynote address today. It's titled Voices Prohibited by Mainstream Media and its role in spreading Islamophobia. Then she will sit down and join our media panel. Rula Jebreal is an award-winning journalist, author, and foreign policy analyst. Her first autobiographical novel, Miral, sold 2 million copies and has been translated into 15 languages. Rula's dramatic screenplay turned Miral into a major motion picture, a rarity for any political film, not to mention a film telling a Palestinian story. Both are available at our Middle East Books booth, and she's signing those books during the reception tonight. Rula was born in Haifa and placed in the Dara Tifl orphanage, founded by the late Nishind al-Husseini in Jerusalem, where she received a superb education. I met her first at a luncheon hosted by Jumana Erekat, the wife of Palestinian ambassador Mayin Erekat. By the time she was 18, Rula told us, she was frustrated by the way Muslim Palestinians were portrayed in the media. I got tired of throwing my shoe at the TV, she told us. So Rula started writing her own articles. She received a scholarship from the Italian government, graduated, and later earned a master's degree in journalism and political science. Rula became the first first foreign anchor woman in the history of Italian television. Her career in American television has been more of a challenge, but I will let her tell her own story. Rula, please join us.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Delinda and everybody at the Washington Report. They've been very active lately, not only organizing this amazing conference, but I have to say, I received a phone call from Delinda 2 weeks ago, and I was visiting some friends in Florida who had some health issues, and Delinda said, well, I need to send you something urgently, and I think you would be fascinated by it. I didn't understand why she was secretive. Then Monday when I came back home and I opened, and there was this package of emails of some producer in Voice of America asking a former speaker of AIPAC if he would be fine that I would be the guest to debate whoever they deem as a proper Israeli official, eventually to debate him on television about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And obviously, I will, spare you some of these misogynist, sexist, disgusting details, the back and forth. But basically, this has been the way my career, somehow whenever I was hired by anybody in American media, and I love when they are about to prepare a war, whether it's a war in Afghanistan or in Iraq, and it's like, we are going to liberate women. We will teach these natives how to treat women. And then you read these emails, and it's like, sure. I'm sure you know exactly how to treat women and how to talk about them. It's fascinating to have, the superior culture. But it's a glimpse of the kind of power that they not only established, they exercise and wield shamefully, without any shame. But I am sure these emails were not the only emails. These are the emails that we knew of. These are emails that we had access to. But I am sure if you read private emails, internal emails of any news outlet, whether it's the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, you will find similar things where we're begging Gideon said that the government is begging the Israeli government, and like, we want to give you the money, and they're saying basically, no, we want more, and somehow we need to kiss their hands. But the media has played a major role in making this happen. I grew up actually admiring American media. I grew up thinking American media is, this is a media that managed to expose major cases of corruption in the history and force a president to resign. This is the media that inspired me as a child, because I thought, you can live actually in a country where a simple journalist, a simple reporter can do his job or her job and can force the most powerful man in the land to answer some tough questions and eventually get, be forced to resign or be impeached. I thought that's the kind of dynamic of a vibrant democracy that makes this democracy vibrant. That's a kind of, journalism I didn't see around me. I grew up in watching Arabic televisions where I knew that somehow somebody in the government has written the questions and maybe the answers also. So I grew up with that kind of culture, thinking, something needs to change here. And I always looked up to Western media. So when I worked in Italian television, they hired me simply because I was the only woman that spoke Arabic. They needed somebody to understand the Middle East. They needed somebody that is native from the region to explain to them what went wrong. That famous article in Newsweek, what went wrong with the Arab Muslim world. And I remember going to my director and explaining to him the difference between Shia and Sunni and why the Iraq war will be disastrous, because just simply looking at the numbers, the composition of the population in Iraq, 60% Shia. They sent me to cover the Iraq war. I started my career in Italian television, and I always love to be underestimated because it gives me more, somehow more freedom, because as soon as they realize what they have, as soon as they realize what I was standing for, what I was doing, then these sexist, misogynist emails was some of the weapons they used and they throw against me. Obviously, it makes me laugh, but it makes me think that there's a lot to be done. American media has been the most disappointing thing I ever seen in my life. Even working in countries like Egypt, I've seen pushbacks by certain journalists, reporters, TV hosts, by far much more than in this country. And I'm saying that because I've seen what did that produce? Iraq was a worse choice. It was a non sequitur country that was invaded for a non-existential threat. And it could have happened only with a tacit, silent, and vocal consent of American media, who sold a lie. And none of these people have ever been fired. They actually been recycled, and they still called as experienced and experts on many issues, on the Iran nuclear deal, or and they're writing long essays about Obama's doctrine, as they call it. Nobody ever questioned their failures, their lies, their manipulation. None of that has happened. But they actually question the fact that, my hair is long or short, or I am skinny or fat. I mean, we're reduced to a level that allowed and enabled every lobbyist to get away with murder and basically paved the way for Donald Trump to become the front runner. I think we're responsible of that. And it reminds me very much of the media in Egypt and Italy before the revolution. So when, the title of the conference, is this good for America? Not only it's bad, Israel influence here goes beyond Israel and Israeli borders. If you think of the larger dynamic in the Middle East, if you think how much money, we're talking about $4 billion to Israel, think of the $2 billion to Egypt. These $2 billion are paid to the Egyptian regime that basically created a deep police state, a deep state, and doomed democracy in that country. This is the country that gave us Zawahiri, #1 of Al-Qaeda today. This is the country that gave us political Islam. Inside the prison cells, the most atrocity has been committed. Torture since the 60s that basically radicalized an entire generation. And they left with one idea. transnational jihad. Go after the regime, create terrorist groups to go after the regime, blow up themselves, and guess what? Every one of their backers, starting with the United States. So somehow we enabled a government that produced mass radicalization. And why? Because of one issue, because of the Camp David Accords, because of the Camp David Accords. Basically, we still give money to a regime that is committing atrocities and violating human rights and killing thousands of people and imprisoning 60,000 as we speak today, because of that peace accord with Israel, or to keep the peace with Israel, or to do Israel dirty jobs. For example, closing the borders with Gaza. The other ally that is, we never not only question it, but if you think of what Israel has been trying to push the United States to do, it goes beyond the Israel-Palestinian issue. We had Bibi Netanyahu, who came here to testify in 2002, and his words was, we need to go into Iraq because it will have do the regime change that we need to do, because this will have a positive effect on the entire region. I mean, you look at the region, I don't see any area where this positive effects you can see. But the whole issue was one, and they've been vocal about it. And the one issue is, now they don't even care about the Palestinian issue, basically. What they care about is the Iran issue. And the Iran issue has been the focus of this government for the last 20 years. So you have the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, Sylvain Shalom, and even the former Ambassador Oren, who basically are telling us that they rather have Sunni radical groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front than any Shia group. As if the answer to the region is, yes, let's wage war on the Shiites, and the Sunni who gave us every, not only radical group, every group that have committed atrocities are actually, we can turn a blind eye on these guys. This is the same reasoning, this is the same mindset of the Cold War. This is exactly the same mindset and never changed. As if they are not realizing that the post-colonial order that's been established in the Middle East have collapsed already. Doesn't exist anymore. And it collapsed because of their choices. The Iraqi war basically ended that post-colonial era. But they are still thinking as if they're living in 1979. The mentality of the Mujahideen was that mentality. There's a Russian invasion, so the Russians are the enemies, and this is the Cold War mentality. So we need to create an alliance with whoever is there to defeat that monster. So we created a Frankenstein monster that is turning on all of us. And we keep repeating the same strategies and the same mistakes. And I understand that it's hard for a politician to change because they are beholden to the checkbooks of Sheldon Adelson and Haim Saban. Somehow, sadly they call it legal corruption in my world. Here they call it Citizen United. But the real failure has been my colleagues, the people who are sitting on television with a revolving door. They served as a person for AIPAC the 10 years earlier, and then they're on CNN as a neutral TV host, or some prison guard who served is lecturing people on some website on how they need to be or to behave as journalists. Somehow the system allowed for these voices to thrive and to become the establishment voices. And when you listen to people debating, how did we not understand that Trump, would become a front runner? The signs were all there. The writing were on the walls. What were you thinking when for years, since 9/11, the idea of us and them became, from marginal idea, became a mainstream idea. The them, was your neighbor who was Muslim or Sikh or eventually, Hasidic Jew, or diversity. The war on diversity started by eliminating critical voices in mainstream media in the United States. I mean, I can't even fathom till now how is possible that in a country that led serious investigative journalism and led to push an administration to resign with Nixon can be the country that allowed not only an administration to abuse their power and pass secret memos and spy on their citizens or torture some people, are surprised today, and some of these speakers are intelligent, surprised that you have fascists on the rise and basically telling you that you didn't actually do enough. When I listen to these debates and I have some of my colleagues who don't even have a follow-up question on some of these candidates who are not only calling to commit war crimes, but they are saying it's not even enough. You need to, expand those war crimes because, waterboarding is not enough. You need maybe to kill him in order and kill his family and his relatives because this is what will make us all safe. Look, I never been in my entire life. I never worked so hard to make people understand what are the stakes. But I'm concerned for the next generation because, when I grew up, obviously I watched that kind of journalist of Dan Rather and others. I think our children are growing up, if they're if they're 15, 16, or 14, and they look for people to inspire them. I mean, if that person is Anderson Cooper, I want to jump from a window. The follow-up question matter more than the question itself, to push back and to, if your job is actually to expose lies, corruption, and deflections and push them to answer it, and the only person has been doing this somehow, and surprisingly, and I'm horrified to say that, has been people on Fox News. I mean, we're looking at Megyn Kelly as the person who managed to actually challenge some of these candidates. But we looked for years at the first African-American president being smacked by the leader of a country of 7 million people. And here you have a country of 300 million people, supposedly the leader of the free world, and with Congress basically accepting that and allowing that. That can lead only in one direction. This is the beginning of dismantling of a democracy of this country. And this is what is worrisome. The Israeli model is not contained in Israel. It's being transported and it's becoming part of the American model. So when you have police brutality and the cozy relationship in the media, it's becoming a cozy relationship in the police departments. So the police who abuse their powers in Ferguson has been trained actually by Israeli police, and it's considered normal. Nobody's investigating these kind of cozy relationship. I am proud actually to be sitting with Philip Wise here, who reported about some of these executives at CNN who are speechwriters for Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, there's the level of cooperation and propaganda has reached such a level that today it's normal. We are the abnormal. We are the aberration. These people are writing the chapter of this nation history. I can't believe that I'm mentioning, this is the quote from Gramsci, my favorite European intellectual who wrote from his prison cells. And he was asked about Mussolini. And he said Mussolini was not an aberration. Mussolini was an autobiography of a nation. He was part of this nation. He was enabled by the media. He was himself a journalist. He was enabled by a system that turned a blind eye. I think we need to push harder, and we need to fight more. And I think we need to create a community that is, we are part of an ecosystem that can help each other to expose this more. We cannot allow ourselves to, I can't, obviously, 15 years ago, I used to throw my shoe at the television. I can't do this anymore. I'm very happy to be ejected from certain TV networks, but I'm very happy actually to be part of a system that whatever Philip or Max Blumenthal and other people write, We need to cooperate so we can push that message. And it can't be parallel world. It must be a united world, because the wave that is coming is by far much more dangerous. I've seen it in other places. I've seen it in Europe, and I've seen it in the Middle East. And these people are beyond ruthless. Berlusconi, when he was elected in 1994, the first 3 things that he did, he sued 18 journalists, kicked 18 others from television, from networks, people who dared to criticize him. Some of them were my friends, Marco Travaglio or Santoro and others. I worked for an Egyptian television. In 2009, after 6 months, I had to leave because the level of bullying and abuse was beyond me. I couldn't control it. It wasn't about me. It was about the people who worked with me. And I knew that while the establishment was talking about the transfer of power from the father, Mubarak, to his son, the people were talking about actually 3 things. And these 3 things still exist. They were talking about freedom, democracy, and dignity. And this is what I kept hearing from the ground. So the detachment between the base and the establishment, and the gap is so deep, but we need to stay tuned with the base, because actually the base will lead the change. I don't believe the establishment will anymore, but I believe the base, the millions of people who were neglected around the Arab world, stood up one morning, apparently without any reason. 3 months earlier, Hillary Clinton said it's a stable country, and people ignored those voices to such extent that they didn't even bother to think or to ask them what you want, what you think. These people stood in the streets and demanded dignity. They overthrew a regime, they had setbacks, but that kind of power, that kind of sentiment is still out there. It's not dead. It's dormant, but it's not dead. I am sure it will rise again. I am sure, like I'm looking at you. And I hope in that moment we'll be ready to help them and build a bigger bridge, a bridge that will unite us here and in the Middle East. And it will not be about them and us, but it will be about all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're reminding me of Gideon Levy's speech last year. He called for an American spring, and I think we are all inspired.